In this video, I'm going to share with you 3 steps that will help you understand and enjoy reading philosophy. These are things that I learned while I studied the subject as part of my undergraduate and master's degree, and they're things I wish people had told me sooner. Therefore, if you're a student or you're just reading for pleasure, then this is the video for you. Step 1 is to make the distinction on whether you will focus on a philosophical topic or a specific philosopher. Focusing on a philosophical subject involves reading a variety of different philosophers' arguments on similar problems in that area. For example, if you focus on political philosophy, you may read about Plato, Thomas Hobbes, and John Locke. If you were to read about a specific philosopher, however, then you would focus solely on their work, which may span a variety of different topics. In the example of Plato, he not only wrote about political philosophy, but also touched on moral philosophy and epistemology as well. So you would find yourself jumping across different areas. The most important thing here is to have a clear focus before you find yourself down a rabbit hole trying to make sense of everything. The mistake that most people make is they pick up the first book that catches their eye without having a clear idea of what they're wanting to read about. If you're just starting out, then I'd recommend focusing on a specific philosophical topic, because it can be easier to get your head around the same philosophical concepts and jumping around different philosophers' positions on them than it is to focus on one philosopher but then jumping between vastly different concepts in philosophy. Also, even though many philosophers have written a variety of different topics, they may only be strong in certain areas. So you may find yourself reading up on arguments and positions that have since been successfully argued against, and they aren't as relevant anymore. In the end, either approach can work, but just be clear which one you're going to take before you start. If you're planning on reading a famous philosophical text, then it can be incredibly useful to read someone else's explanation of it first. Yes, this can spoil the ending, however, philosophy books aren't meant to be read like novels. Look at this like reading the instruction manual to your new iPhone. Yes, it's more tempting to dive in and work it out as you go along, but it gives you a heads up of what to expect. Nigel Warburton, for example, is an excellent author of writing introductory philosophy books. I'd highly recommend picking up any of his books before you start reading primary texts. The reason for this is that there are additional challenges to reading philosophy other than just the abstract nature of it. For example, many texts have been translated from a different language, therefore they may not be as clear than they would be if you read them in the original language they were written in. Also, not all texts were written with the purpose of being published one day as a book. For example, Marcus Aurelius' Meditations were a journal written by him as his time as Roman Emperor. Therefore, he doesn't structure it in such a way that's trying to guide his readers through his way of thinking. Finally, not all great philosophers are great writers, and some do a terrible job of explaining their positions. Many philosophers have spent years contemplating terms such as free will and justice without learning what it means to be clear and concise. Therefore, having an idea of what to expect going in can help you overcome these challenges. When reading a good novel, you can get sucked into burning through chapter after chapter and you'll go cover to cover without rereading anything. But this isn't always the best way to read philosophical texts. Instead, you should treat it more like trying to explain to your mum how to safely shut down her laptop. You're going to have to take it slow, go over things more than once, and be prepared for misunderstandings. Like when you say close all windows, then your mum will put down the phone and physically walk around her house and start closing windows. The point is that philosophical texts can be quite dense and not every writer paces out their arguments slowly. Therefore, it's up to you to take some steps to ensure that you understand things correctly. Firstly, don't always read multiple chapters at once. Depending on who you're reading, there just might be too much to cover in one sitting. Therefore, break it down into 1 or 2 chapters at most to begin with. Secondly, if you get to the end of the chapter and you're not actually sure what you've just read, then don't just push through to the next one. Go back and reread it to make sure you fully understand it to avoid confusion further down the line. Finally, if there is a lot covered in a chapter, then try and summarise it in your own words on no more than one piece of paper. I always found this a great technique during my studies, especially when dealing with a really complex idea, because when you try and explain something in your own words, you're not only going to push yourself to understand it better, but you're also more likely to remember it as well. The only caveat to this is just be careful that your understanding isn't a misinterpretation. However, if you've done some prior reading that I mentioned in step 2, then this should help you avoid that and stay on the right path. If you follow all of these steps, then you'll soon find it easier to explain Kant's categorical imperatives than you will trying to explain the difference in 5G and Wi-Fi to your parents. I really do hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, I'll put a link to some other videos I think you may also enjoy as well.